The third month after parting with the benefactor, he ran into me on a European street, supporting my pregnant belly as I walked out of the hospital. Ambitious, but too foolish, the man remarked coldly. He had his assistant relay a message to me, tossing me a card and ordering me to abort the child. Mr. Ellis will not be manipulated by a child. The Franklin family will not open its doors to you because of a bastard. I hope you know your place and don't have any other ideas. I declined the card and smiled. You've misunderstood. This is my husband's and my child. We got married 2 months ago. It has nothing to do with Mr. Ellis. Hello, everyone. Welcome to my channel. Subscribe us to read wonderful stories every day. Now the story begins. London's winters are always bleak, and the wind on the streets stings one's face for no reason. Upon hearing my words, George, the assistant, showed no change in his expression, only feigning slight surprise as he said, "Is that so?" Having been by Ellis's side for a long time, his ability to observe and interpret people's expressions had grown with each passing day. His eyes behind the lenses glanced over my abdomen, and he asked respectfully, "Miss Letitia, how many weeks along are you in your pregnancy?" "About 12 weeks. He nodded slightly, a gentle yet distant smile still on his face. "That seems a bit too coincidental with the timing of your departure from Mr. Ellis." As the most trusted assistant by Ellis's side, he had seen far too many women who would go to any lengths to stay close to Ellis. I lowered my head and pulled out my phone. "Here is a wedding photo of me and my husband," but he politely interrupted me. "That doesn't prove anything. Mr. Ellis is very sensitive about the matter of illegitimate children. I hope Miss Letitia understands this clearly. Otherwise, Mr. Ellis won't hesitate to have you lie on the abortion table for the second time." My fingers gripping the phone stiffened slightly as I lifted my eyes. The first snowfall of the year drifted down slowly. I collided with the dark, stern gaze of the man through the high-rise floor-to-ceiling window. He was looking down at me from above, perhaps waiting to catch me again, pale and flustered. He was accustomed to being in control, and my pregnancy undoubtedly challenged his bottom line once more. I put away my phone, took a deep breath, and turned to tell Assistant George, "Please inform Mr. Ellis that I won't make the same mistake twice." My tone was quite gentle as I said earnestly, "I have no attachment to the child I once lost, nor any intention of using a child to secure status or fight for family inheritance. This is truly, simply my husband's and my child. I did indeed once carry Ellis's child. It was my 6th year by his side. A little life connected by blood took root in my belly, miraculously igniting my passion for life. At 17, I left my hometown to drift north to pay off my father's gambling debts, then spent several years as a hostess in the glitzy nightlife scene. Through all the ups and downs, I had few relatives by my side and even fewer friends. It was the first time I had been so bold, hiding it from Ellis with the intention of keeping it. It wasn't until a drinking party where I drank on his behalf and threw up repeatedly, a woman brought by a vice president joked about whether I was pregnant. I clearly saw that Ellis frowned almost imperceptibly at that moment, his sharp and scrutinizing gaze fixed on my lower abdomen. He did not allow any surprises in his life, and this sudden child had almost stepped on every one of his landmines. Moreover, I had kept it from him for so long. That was the first time he lost his temper with me, gritting his teeth and speaking with sarcasm. "I underestimated you, Marion. You're quite something." He coldly threw me out of the villa and declared, "I'll give you one night to reflect. If you still can't recognize your place, then pack your things and get out early." It happened to snow that night. The biting cold wind blew against my face. I gazed into the distance at the vast expanse of white, gently touching my slightly swollen belly, and let out a soft sigh with reddened eyes. After 3 months of being on edge, my nerves finally relaxed. Perhaps that wasn't such a bad thing. I tried to convince myself with forced ease. I might just be the only one among his many lovers who didn't get a breakup settlement and still managed to make him angry. The fetus had already developed to 12 weeks at that time, and a forced abortion might cause cervical tearing. In addition, due to my long-term drinking habits, my physical condition was too weak. The doctor said that if I had an abortion, I might never be able to have children again in my life. But the man just extinguished his cigarette, his dark eyes showing no emotion, and replied indifferently, "What does that have to do with me? Raising an illegitimate child within the circle isn't particularly difficult." Even his arrogant brothers half-jokingly advised him, "Just send the child abroad to be raised once it's born. After all, you're already in your 30s. And she's the only one by your side all these years. Having a child would be a good thing." Ellis remained silent. Later, after several rounds of drinks, someone, drunk and teasing, said, "No way. Ellis, you've kept that person by your side for so many years. Dare you say you never had even a bit of genuine feeling?" Another probed, "Could it be you're still thinking about Luna, regarding this white moonlight from his youth who went abroad and vanished without a trace?" Ellis just glanced coldly. It has nothing to do with her. When he encountered my question again, he casually replied, I just thought she looked pleasing, so I kept her around for a few more years. A low-class hostess is only fit to be a mistress, not a wife. He wouldn't want a child of such lowly status. I was obedient from start to finish, not shedding a single tear on the day I went to the hospital. Later, due to massive bleeding, my life hung by a thread on the operating table. I spent several weeks in the ICU before barely pulling through. On the day I was discharged, he actually postponed a meeting to come see me, dressed in a sharp, dark overcoat. His gaze was cold and stern as he spoke as clearly as possible. Marion, I cannot marry you. I will only have legitimate heirs, not some illegitimate child who can't be shown in public. I slowly pursed my pale lips and gave him a faint smile. I know, this was exactly what he liked most about me. Knowing my place, sensible and obedient enough. The snow fell softly outside, while the howling cold wind battered the tightly sealed glass window, from age 17 to 27. I suddenly realized that this was the 10th year I had seen the snow in Kyoto. A woman's most beautiful years were spent right here, probably because I had a good attitude in admitting my mistake and had just been through a life-and-death experience. He didn't press the matter further. The private ward was heated, and the man's cold, fierce expression gradually softened as he picked up an apple and began peeling it. I had my assistant pick out some bags and jewelry for you. They'll be delivered to you in a few days. I quietly watched the spiral of apple peel, one loop after another. Tears welled up in my stinging eyes, but I forced them back with effort. The man's long lashes were still dusted with snow, his expression cold and serious. His movements meticulous. You'll only be with me for a few more years. Once I enter a political marriage, I'll naturally let you go. He sliced an apple and brought a piece to my lips, softening his voice unusually to coax me. Marion, be good. I won't treat you unfairly, all right? He truly did not treat me unfairly. The 10 years by his side were indeed the most glorious and triumphant moments of my life. Even when Luna appeared in the end, he never once made me feel embarrassed. I brushed the snow off my shoulder and told Assistant George, to put Mr. Ellis at ease, I'll go for a prenatal paternity test in a couple of days. Then please let Miss Letticia inform me when the time comes, and I'll accompany you. He was clearly afraid I would fake the results to deceive him. I nodded, that's fine. He smiled as he handed over the business card, not forgetting to add a warning. Miss Letticia, if there's anything, you can contact me. Mr. Ellis is about to get married. So I hope Miss Letticia knows how to behave appropriately. The new wife is very sensitive about this kind of thing. Actually, there's no need to worry. Before I left, I had already deleted all of Ellis's contact information, changed my phone number and personal WeChat, and even sold the residence he had arranged for me. If not for the chance encounter on the street today, I suppose we probably wouldn't have been in touch for the rest of our lives. And the new wife is probably that white moonlight of his who just returned from abroad. I forced a smile and nodded. Then I wish Mr. Ellis a happy marriage. Snowflakes drifted down from the sky, falling thick and fast. I buried my face in my scarf, turned around, and walked alone along the snow-covered street toward home. That dark, cold gaze from the high-rise building never left me. Many years ago, on a snowy night, while carrying my drunken self through the streets, he had clearly stated that he would only marry for alliance. Any relationship that fails to yield practical value is merely a temporary consumable. He demanded a match of equal social standing and class compatibility, all to maximize benefits. He raised me, but it was just a transaction with a clear price tag. I was both sober and sinking, but it wasn't until today that I suddenly realized, principles are set for substitutes like us, and the white moonlight exists beyond principles. Even if she had nothing, she would still receive his favoritism. No one knows why this white moonlight, who left for a foreign country in her youth and vanished without a trace, would suddenly reappear. But I know, I once had an absurd dream. In the dream, she was a strategist who, after maxing out Ellis's affection points, returned to her original world. She got married and had children there, but due to financial struggles and her husband's infidelity, she chose to return to Ellis's side. To verify whether Ellis still loved her, she insisted on seeing me before I left. In the cafe, the woman wore a plain white dress, with no makeup, quietly observing my outfit and appearance, though she tried hard to mimic the pure and innocent look of her youth. The weariness and calculation in her eyes couldn't be hidden. In contrast, I, well-nourished by wealth, exuded a lazy, tranquil aura, free from the worries of making a living. This stirred in her an indescribable, inexplicable resentment. She only asked me 3 questions. How long have you been together? Or rather, how long have you been by his side? Holding my coffee cup, I answered slowly and clearly, 9 years and 6 months. In the 7th year by Ellis's side, we had a 6-month period of no contact. Some said he was going to enter a marriage alliance, while others claimed he had found a more convincing replacement, just when I thought this relationship was about to be severed completely. George's assistant suddenly reached out to me one day. After a satisfyingly intense moment of intimacy, he tacitly allowed me to occupy the most important place by his side, leaving no one else around but me. The woman before me looked somewhat displeased. She didn't want to hear such a clear timeline, but still, she forced a slight smile, pretending not to care. Has it been that long? Did you do it? That was her second question. I was stunned for a moment. She quickly realized how ridiculous the question sounded. After all, it's been 10 years, and Ellis is a normal man. It's impossible to have no desires, but I don't mind telling her what she wants to hear. For the first 5 years, there weren't any. Ellis truly did wait for her. As if finally realizing her place in Ellis's heart, she breathed a sigh of relief, her smile growing more sincere as she chided. Oh, so I came back too late then. She then asked the final question. Do you kiss when you do it? Kissing and caressing should be reserved for lovers. She especially needed this to prove it. In the stagnant air, she stared intently at the changes in my expression. For a moment, I was dazed and answered quickly, no. Her tense fingertips suddenly relaxed, all the tension and worry receding like a tide. Replacing it was a victor's flippancy and self-satisfaction. All right, then I know. Thank you for taking care of Ellis all these years. She finally gave a generous smile, assuming the demeanor of the rightful one, her tone tinged with affectionate complaint. He's cold by nature and not very good at caring for others. I'm afraid you've suffered quite a bit because of it. I didn't deny it, softly uttering an since I had long envisioned this day. I didn't feel much emotional turbulence. I've seen too many infatuated girls in the nightlife scene who thought that staying long enough would earn them a proper status, only to end up in a messy fallout and get warned by the legitimate wife. I think, as a shadowy stand-in, I've been fortunate enough. But, I lied to her a little. Ellis didn't mind kissing, especially when a kiss could resolve certain emotions. He wouldn't waste time or money overthinking it. Occasionally when he was satisfied, he would also hold me and casually peck kisses. To be honest, it wasn't particularly heartfelt, but these moments, tinged with a bit of tenderness, always gave me the illusion that he and I were just a normal couple. You see, women are always moved by these utterly ordinary little things, and in the end, they willingly fall into them. Even I am no exception. Winter nights always descend quickly. When I got home, the nanny mysteriously brought me a small plate of black truffle mushroom pasta. She said this was her new attempt and looked forward to my approval. I was momentarily stunned, then smiled after a moment and pushed it away apologetically. I don't like pasta. My husband has gone abroad for further training. He was afraid I wouldn't take good care of myself, so he hired a cook for me. Unable to figure out my taste, the nanny felt a bit ashamed and said she would make something else for me. In the quiet living room, the bright moon hung high outside the window. The crisp yet rich aroma of black truffle rose, strongly pulling my memories back to the past. Back then, young and full of energy, I was always burning the candle at both ends. After I've exhausted my energy, I always get hungry. That was the first time I stayed overnight at his place. It was a huge villa, but there wasn't much instant food stocked up. In my early years, I spent all my time trying to please the boss and earn more tips. Dinner was just a quick bite to get by. I couldn't cook, let alone use the kitchenware in his kitchen. I could only dig out some bread from the cupboard and hide on the sofa, nibbling away. Perhaps Ellis was in a good mood that night. Seeing how pitifully hungry I looked, he actually turned and went into the kitchen. I waited, growing drowsy. When my eyes opened in a daze, I only saw the dim, golden light in the living room. A noble yet languid man, wearing loungewear matching mine, walked toward me step by step in the soft glow. With his slender, elegant fingers, he pushed a plate of pasta toward me and said in a playful tone, "Try it." Many times after that, whenever I saw black truffle, I would think of that bowl of pasta. These small things, time and again, drag me into that gentle yet merciless web. I clenched my palm tightly. If I want to completely detach myself, I must not touch anything related to memories. On Monday, I took a sample of my husband's hair, sealed it in a transparent bag, and tucked it into my handbag at the hospital. I saw not only George's assistant, but also Luna. Compared to her simple appearance that day, she now looked much more elegant and refined, carrying the latest luxury handbag. Her heavy makeup smoothed out the flaws on her face, and even the weariness in her eyes had completely vanished. Money truly is the best nourishment for a woman. I paused my steps slightly and gave a slight nod. Miss Luna. She didn't respond, her arrogance and displeasure barely concealed as she scrutinized my abdomen back and forth. The atmosphere grew delicate. Assistant George said respectfully, "Our madam was concerned and came along to check. If Miss Letitia has nothing to hide, she surely won't mind." I clenched my fingers and smiled. Of course. Madam has also prepared Mr. Ellis's hair sample. Testing both together will be more credible. He was very thorough, and I had no objections, handing over the transparent bag. When I walked out of the hospital after the blood draw, the snow had cleared and the sky was bright. The glaring sunlight reflected off the understated luxury of the black sedan. A man leaned against the car door, his profile sharp and stern, a cigarette held between his slender fingers as he seemed to be waiting for someone, impatience already showing between his brows. After 3 months, he hadn't changed much, and I had already accomplished the most important event of my life. I had intended to slip away quietly, but the next moment, the man's eyelids lifted, and his gaze fixed on me. People came and went around us, yet they automatically cleared a circle around this aloof and imposing figure. I had no choice but to meet his eyes and force a polite smile. Mr. Ellis. What a coincidence. Unfortunately, he lowered his gaze, his mocking eyes sweeping over my slightly swollen abdomen. It seems the last lesson wasn't harsh enough. Making you think you could try the same trick again. I wanted to explain. No, you've misunderstood. But he cut me off. Misunderstood. As if he had heard some clumsy joke, he repeated the 2 words mockingly. Timing, motive, you've got it all, and you're telling me it's a misunderstanding. The man tossed away his cigarette butt, his leather shoes stepping on the damp, cold ground as he closed in on me step by step. You left me for 3 months. And just happened to get pregnant 12 weeks ago. Tell me, which man is so capable that you jumped into a new life so quickly, even rushing to get pregnant? His words were utterly cutting, his reasoning so logical that I was left speechless for a moment. Marion, you've been by my side for 10 years. You should have learned to be smarter. Don't use such foolish tactics, and don't force me to exhaust the last bit of affection between us. The man looked down on me, judging me from above. Each word cold as a blade. He is always like this, arrogant, confident, interpreting everything through his own logic. The arrival of this child once again stepped on his landmine. The restless sunlight couldn't melt even a hint of the coldness. I took a deep breath, no longer wanting to offer futile explanations. I looked up, for the first time gazing at him so calmly and earnestly, no longer politely addressing him as Mr. Ellis. Ellis. My voice was soft, yet clear enough. Do you really think that aside from you, I truly have no other choices in my life? Finding a suitable person to marry and having a lovely child, this has always been a plan in my life. Besides, the report hasn't even come out yet, so why must you condemn me now? My eyes were misty with tears as I asked in a soft yet resolute tone, why don't you believe me, Ellis? He stared at me silently, the coldness in his eyes undiminished. Until a tear slid from the corner of my eye and dripped onto his expensive handmade leather shoes. His long fingers twitched unconsciously at his side, his lips pressed into a tight line as he averted his gaze. Playing the weak card has always worked well on him. I am well aware of my strengths. He silently took a step back, putting distance between us. After a moment, his gaze turned cold, and his tone carried a warning. Marion, you'd better make sure what you're saying is true, of course. The report will be ready in a week, and Mr. Ellis will definitely receive a satisfactory answer. The man stared at my retreating figure, his cold gaze turning somewhat complex and hard to decipher. A satisfactory answer. A strange emotion suddenly welled up in his chest. Is it his? Or is it not his? An inexplicable restlessness coiled around his heart. He suddenly realized, it seemed that no matter what the answer was, he wouldn't be satisfied. Everyone thinks I'm trying to use my child to climb the social ladder, but in reality, I don't have such great ambitions for fame and fortune. In my earlier years, my only thought was probably how to stay by Ellis's side a little longer. People always like to use light as a metaphor for salvation and love, so in my 20s, I like to think of Ellis as my light, the only salvation in my debauched and decaying life. I even had the despicable desire to push away all the women around him and become the only one by his side. Perhaps you'll find me laughable, but you have to understand, the year I met him, I had just turned 20, he paid off my father's gambling debts, dealt with the loan sharks who had me living in constant fear, and gave me the chance to continue my university education. I think, no matter who it was, in such a situation, they would probably fall hopelessly in love, so after graduation, I willingly stayed by his side, accompanying him to various drinking gatherings to discuss collaborations. I shielded him from one strong drink after another. He actually doesn't really like drinking, except for occasions where it's necessary. He avoids it entirely, leaving it all to me to handle. I always wished I could stay by his side for a few more years, so every time the liquor burned my throat, I stayed silent and smiled sweetly at him. I would blush when I received his approving gaze, and my heart would race wildly when I could lean on his shoulder under the pretense of being tipsy. He always had many female companions around him. Some were for attending banquets, some were arranged by the family, But most didn't last more than 3 months. I stubbornly relied on my drinking skills to stay by his side year after year. The longer I stayed by his side, the more I understand, the more I realize the gap between him and me. He could never marry me. He used to say this often. Later, I knew it even without him saying it. Since you've chosen a shortcut, don't complain about the thorns along the way. The class divide is as vast as a chasm. I am well aware of this. So, he was never the one I chose to marry. The results came out on a Friday, and I went to the hospital as promised. George's assistant collected the report and took me to a nearby restaurant. Luna had been waiting there for a long time, looking exceptionally calm, just as I was about to open the report. George's assistant pressed down on my wrist, wearing a distant yet polite smile. Since Miss Letitia is confident about this result, why not let Our Lady reveal it? I vaguely sensed that something was wrong. Luna curled her lips into a smile, as if she had already seen through everything and was just here to collect the answer. After glancing at the report, she swiftly tossed Ellis's copy onto the table. Explain yourself, Miss Letitia. Ellis hates being lied to the most. Especially when it comes to matters involving children. My gaze fell, the bold text above clearly stating, 99% confirmed paternity. Upon seeing this absurd conclusion, my heart inevitably clenched. George's assistant voluntarily stepped out, leaving the space for the two of us. I was momentarily stunned, picking up the report and reading it over several times. Luna looked quite pleased with herself and sneered, "Is Miss Letitia staying quiet because she's thinking of how to make up a lie? I can understand you wanting to climb into the upper circles, but Ellis and I are about to get married. Who are you trying to disgust by bringing out a bastard child?" I quickly figured it out. No wonder she was so certain about the results, so it was all prearranged. Maybe I looked too obedient and was younger than her, making her think I'd be easy to manipulate. But those years I spent in the nightlife scene weren't for nothing. Later, following Ellis to so many drinking parties, I've also heard plenty of those dirty tricks about climbing the social ladder. All the samples from that day passed through her hands and those of George's assistant. Even a fool could tell something was wrong. I threw the report in front of her and said pityingly, "Luna, you're really afraid of me." The smile on her face stiffened. I leaned closer to her and chuckled knowingly. "You're well aware this child isn't Ellis's, yet you insist on making it his, right?" She stared wide-eyed in shock, about to retort, but was cut off by my next words. "You've gone to such lengths precisely to make Ellis witness the irrefutable evidence, haven't you? To make him firmly believe that I, Marion, am an unrepentant woman trying to entangle him with a bastard child, so that whatever lingering affection and guilt he still holds for me turns completely into disgust and anger." Her face instantly turned ashen, and her voice rose sharply. "What nonsense are you spouting? What schemes have I been plotting?" The sarcastic curve at the corner of my lips widened as I continued to expose what she thought were hidden thoughts. "You want him to push me away with his own hands, so that it can be a permanent solution, because you understand better than anyone how much Ellis detests illegitimate children and values bloodline. So you gave him the most unforgivable reason to turn against me. Indeed, her greatest fear isn't the child, but the uncertain old feelings in Ellis's heart. She must personally extinguish this spark. 10 years, that's 5 times longer than the 2 years she spent saving Ellis. How could she not be afraid? She suddenly stood up, slammed the report on the table, and said in desperation, "This is the truth now. I've already sent the report to him. Ellis will only believe this now. Even if you try to sweet-talk your way out of it, he'll just think you're lying, that you're deceiving him." I laughed carelessly, sat down on the sofa, and retorted, "You think you hold a lot of weight in his heart, don't you? That was 10 years, Luna," I said. The more afraid she became, the more I aimed for her heart. 10 years that you can never erase, no matter what. She was utterly enraged by me, every word seeming to be squeezed through gritted teeth as she sharply emphasized, "Marion, you're the one who isn't loved, understand? What does 10 years matter, if I hadn't left? How could someone like you, who came from the nightlife scene, ever get a chance to serve by Ellis's side? Can you even count the number of men you've been with? You've enjoyed the privileges of being Mrs. Franklin for 10 years for nothing. After pretending to be high class for so long, have you really forgotten who you are?" I neither agreed nor disagreed, tilting my head and smiling. "What, Miss Luna, are you jealous?" she sneered. "Jealous? Ha, what do I have to be jealous of? He just sees you as a disposable plaything." "Oh, right. Didn't you even get pregnant with Ellis's child back then? Did he want it? And now this?" She suddenly reached out, almost poking my stomach, her face filled with extreme malice and mockery. "Do you think it will be any different? I tell you, even if this really is Ellis's child, it will be born as an illegitimate child that can't see the light of day. Just like you, it will be scorned and cursed behind its back for a lifetime. A little bastard born from a lowly wretch." My expression finally turned completely cold. I abruptly stood up, grabbed the coffee beside me, and splashed it directly onto her face. Ellis appeared at this very moment. He walked in and immediately saw Luna, her face covered in coffee stains, utterly disheveled, trembling and sobbing. He didn't even need a second to decide. The man's face was calm and indifferent, but his eyes were dark and sharp. He picked up a full glass of ice water from the table and poured it directly over my head. The whole process was swift and decisive, without the slightest hesitation. Had enough of this nonsense. His voice held not the slightest fluctuation. Yet its tone chilled to the bone. Ice-cold water trickled from the top of my head down the side of my face, seeping into my collar. The biting cold made me shiver and tremble uncontrollably. I closed my eyes, vaguely recalling the first year I had spent by his side. There have been such scenes. The first time he took me to a business dinner to discuss a partnership, I was too nervous and accidentally spilled wine on a CEO's shirt cuff while pouring. He then calmly stood up and, in front of everyone at the table, poured the entire bottle of wine over my head. In the same flat tone, he scolded me. "Are you mute? Why aren't you apologizing?" But it was different from 10 years ago. In that moment, I felt no resentment or indignation, only amusement. So amused it was ironic. So amused that tears nearly fell from the corners of my eyes. I struggled to hold back my stinging, reddened eyes. Meeting his condescending gaze, I spoke hoarsely, my voice trembling, enunciating each word deliberately, devoid of any emotion as I stated the facts. "Ellis, I have never done anything to wrong you, not once. For 10 years, I obeyed your every word. If you told me to drink to shield you, I drank. Even if it meant ending up in the hospital with a bleeding stomach, I never refused. If you told me to please someone, I went. Even if they took liberties and groped me all over, I never resisted. If you told me to abort the child, I did. Even if it meant I might die on the operating table, I didn't hesitate for a second. Haven't I been obedient enough, Ellis?" My eyes reddened as I questioned. "But why are you treating me like this?" His gaze darkened, and he remained silent. I forced a smile, tears streaming uncontrollably from the corners of my eyes. "I've always been good, never caused you any trouble. I was decisive when we broke up, didn't ask for any compensation, didn't leave myself any way to contact you. I even sincerely wished for your happiness." My throat choked up so badly that I couldn't continue for a moment. I just stared at him stubbornly, as if pleading for an answer, and asked, "But why are you treating me like this, Ellis?" Over the years, I've actually rarely cried in front of him, very rarely. The man's dark pupils fixed on me, his Adam's apple bobbing slightly. Scalding tears welled up from the corners of my eyes and fell to the ground. It was as if it struck right at his heart, scorching it so fiercely that it trembled. His fingers, hanging at his side, unconsciously clenched. Just moments ago, he had lifted the glass of ice water with such ease, yet now it felt as heavy as 1,000 pounds, making even the slightest movement a struggle. He had been through countless meetings that determined the life or death of the company, but for the first time, he found himself at a loss for words, his cold, hard gaze fixed on my tear-streaked face, unable to look away. His silence finally shattered the last shred of my sanity. I could no longer control my crumbling emotions. "Why, just why do you have to disturb my life? Why jump to the conclusion that this child must be yours? Why push me to the point where I can't even prove my own innocence?" He suddenly spoke up. "Because we did it that night." The Luna beside us covered her face, utterly disbelieving. She probably wouldn't have thought, on the night her flight landed. While Ellis's body was still entangled with mine, her face instantly turned pale, and she rushed over to ask Ellis what was going on, but was Ellis disgustedly pushed away. I suddenly laughed, tears streaming down my face as I did so. "Is it just because of this reason, Ellis? When haven't we done it? You've worn a condom only a handful of times, and we've been like this for so many years. How could you think that one time would get me pregnant?" His jaw tightened, his gaze icy, as he threw the report in front of him. "This is my child." "It is not," I retorted loudly. In the deserted restaurant, we confronted each other without a word. The atmosphere was unbearably tense. I was the first to calm down. "Ellis, didn't the doctor tell you that after losing that child, it would be very difficult for me to conceive again?" His face turned icy cold. "But you are clearly pregnant now." "That's because my husband is a doctor." I interrupted him, my eyes completely reddened. "Ellis, I took contraceptives every time after we were together, and that time was no exception. You wouldn't allow a bastard child to exist, would you?" "But Ellis, what are you doing now?" These questions struck his rationality like a heavy blow. That's right, what was he doing, in the coffee shop? A scene of utter chaos, with my hair still soaking wet. I looked at him almost pleadingly and called his name. "Ellis, I'm begging you." "Okay." He could see every emotion in my eyes, so clearly that it made his heart ache. But this plea wasn't about asking him to believe me. I said, "Ellis, let me go." These words fell into his ears. His heart felt as if it had been suddenly seized. An inexplicable bitterness spread from the depths of his heart. The winter in London is truly cold. The soaked clothes clung to the body, as if freezing one's very organs to the point of shivering. I tightened my expensive black coat, unable to hold back a few sneezes, and quickened my pace. It wasn't far from my home, and today happened to be the day my husband's flight was scheduled to land. The person who has been away for almost half a month is finally coming back. I touched my lower abdomen and took a deep breath. The baby in my belly has been very well behaved. Even though I was so emotionally worked up just now, it never once acted up. I thought and regretted at the same time. I was still too kind just now. Even the coffee I splashed on Luna was lukewarm. And I only aimed at her face, but that glass of ice water drenched me from head to toe. It's really unfair. Behind me, Ellis followed at a short distance, silent yet persistent. He had offered to drive me, but I refused. You might as well check if the test samples were swapped. This matter was handled by George's assistant and Luna, and I need an explanation too. With his power and wealth, this was not a problem at all. I am absolutely certain that this is my and my husband's baby. He didn't say a word, just stared at my pregnant belly. Actually, it was only slightly rounded and not very noticeable, but he still found it glaringly harsh, stirring a strong sense of displeasure and resistance deep within him, and this feeling was even more pronounced than when I was pregnant back then. He had actually vaguely foreseen the test results, since I had no reason to lie, but he resisted thinking about and accepting it. The man's gaze fell on the plain ring on my ring finger. He stared for a long, long time, so long that his eyes turned red. When he spoke again, his voice was slightly hoarse. "You bought the ring yourself, didn't you? It's common for single men and women abroad to buy rings to wear themselves, just to reduce the chances of being hit on." His question itself carried a sense of self-deception and desperation. The answer was so clearly laid out before him, yet he still hoped for my nod, as if with my nod, everything that had happened over these 3 months could vanish into thin air, wiped clean with a single stroke. I would still be the Marion who had walked with him through the long 10 years, the Marion who would never leave him unless he said to part. Even the child in my belly could be considered a gift from our last night together before I left. He thought he wouldn't mind raising an illegitimate child, but I just smiled, almost cruelly saying, "It was my husband who drafted it by hand and spent a month designing it. Mr. Ellis, we are very compatible, deeply in love, and soon we will have a baby of our own." That faint glimmer of hope was completely extinguished. He let out a self-mocking laugh, at a loss for words for a moment, and as he lowered his head, his eyes inexplicably reddened. Just 3 months. It was only 3 months. Why won't heaven give him even a moment to react? 2 rows of footprints emerged in the snow, one deep, one shallow, at the doorstep. I took off my coat in front of the man behind me and threw it into the trash can. I was certain he didn't need a coat, and it saved us the trouble of returning it and staying in touch. He had thrown away a coat worth over 10,000 once before. That night was also a snowy one like this. Because the business partner I was dealing with that night was particularly difficult, I was forced to drink too much. I grabbed his coat collar and vomited all over him. Perhaps because he was in a good mood after the deal was successfully closed, he simply discarded the soiled, expensive coat and effortlessly scooped me up in his arms. I can't remember whether I was drunk that night or not. I only recall the moon was full, his heartbeat was steady, and the snowflakes landed on his long, delicate eyelashes, so beautiful it was hard to look away. The snow that night was truly cold. Drowsily, I nestled against his warm chest, greedily wishing the road could stretch a little longer. At the same time, I am also very well aware, the warmth in winter is indeed something to cherish. But you shouldn't let that attachment trap you in the entire winter. Just as I was about to leave, the man behind me suddenly called out to me. His eyes silently reddened. His voice hoarse and strained when he spoke, his expression dazed. If only I had been willing to keep that child back then. I interrupted him. I wasn't willing. I spoke slowly and earnestly, word by word. "Ellis, I will only have a normal family, raising a child that belongs to me and my loved one. Not a disdained, illegitimate child who can't be shown in public. I never once thought that child could stay. Never." His heart was pierced sharply, a bloody pain spreading through his limbs. Tears suddenly fell from his sore eyes. Before, he clearly had no feelings for that child. Why does just the thought of it now make it hard to breathe and my heart ache so much? Later, the test results came out. The child in my womb was indeed not his. Luna has not shown up since that night. I know the system determined that her mission of this long-awaited reunion had failed, and sent her back to her original world, after experiencing such extravagance and splendor. How could she ever be content to endure a mediocre and unfaithful husband and a life of poverty and destitution? The immense mental torment kept her on the verge of a breakdown day after day. and the assistant George, who took money to do the job, was also quickly fired, and no company dared to hire him again. Even though he had followed Ellis for so many years, Ellis never showed any mercy. He had always been such a cold-blooded and ruthless person. At the end of winter, Ellis came to see me for the last time. He chose the same restaurant as last time. Just as he was about to pour me a drink, I reached out and gently stopped him. "It's fruit wine, low in alcohol. It won't affect the baby in your belly," he said, his gaze fixed on me, his voice inexplicably strained. I pursed my lips and smiled faintly, telling him with unprecedented honesty, "Mr. Ellis, I don't like drinking. I never liked drinking. Life forced me onto the path of being a drinking companion." He was stunned, and after a long pause, it seemed he finally grasped the reality. Even after walking together for 10 years, he didn't know that, just like him, I didn't actually enjoy drinking. After the meal, he still insisted on walking me home. Just as I was about to step into the house, he called out to me in the swirling snow, "Marion, have you ever loved me?" Once such a proud and noble man, he too had asked this cliched question, through the howling wind and drifting snow. I turned to look at him. I blinked my eyes hard. I knew he was harsh, cold, and selfish, but I couldn't deny that he had been involved in every major change in my life, from a high school-educated hostess to a college graduate from a prestigious university, from a damp basement to a bright, spacious riverside apartment, from timid and insecure to brave and gentle, from a young girl to a grown woman. Once, I came to Kyoto all alone, and had to tough everything out by myself. Later, his simple and casual "what's wrong" was enough to resolve all my troubles. Ellis, this name was etched deep into my bones. Long, long ago, he changed my life, pulling me out of the mud and showing me a broader world. He also gave me confidence, letting me know that as long as I spoke his name, no one would dare to bully me. At the same time, he also gave me the most painful lesson, making me understand that a love like a moth flying into the flame has no future. At 20, I clichédly compared him to the light that saved me. At 30, standing here, I would still say the same. Ellis is the beam of light that changed my life, but I know even better that this light was never meant to be my destination. So when his first love returned, I didn't hesitate to step aside. I hoped that the light that pulled me out of the mud could also embrace the one he had waited for all these years, even though, in the end, I messed it all up. But this is not my fault. It was then that I felt the velvet box in my pocket. I don't know when he slipped it in. I didn't even look at it. He threw it directly into the snow, box and all. At this point, whether there was love or not had become a meaningless question. I was no longer the girl who needed to cling to someone else's light to survive. The room was lit with a warm glow. My husband is cooking for me. I am walking step by step towards my spring. End of text. Extra chapter times Ellis' perspective. The first time I met Marion was at a glitzy nightclub. I don't like discussing business in such settings, it's too noisy and gives me a headache. But since our partner extended such a warm invitation, it would be impolite to turn them down. Back then, she was probably just 20 years old, yet she was already a seasoned veteran of the nightlife scene. Wearing the most revealing dress and sporting a glamorous makeup look, she skillfully charmed the customers. Her face was so exquisitely beautiful and radiant, yet her eyes were a pair of round, almond-shaped ones, and when she smiled, dimples would appear. It was the first time I had thought of Luna in years. Two people worlds apart. Yet, in that moment when she poured the wine, I saw a resemblance. She could really hold her liquor, her voice was soft, and her words were sweet, making the executives burst into laughter. Even in such a high-end nightclub filled with beautiful women, she still stood out brilliantly. So I remembered her. At that time, my company was in a transition period, and there were many drinking gatherings every day. I enjoy tasting wine, but I dislike drinking it meaninglessly, as if it were water, just pouring it down my throat. Most of the women around me couldn't handle their alcohol well, so I naturally thought of her, 30,000 per time, to drink on my behalf. This was much more than what she earned at the nightclub, so she worked very hard. No matter what kind of alcohol was on the table, she could pick it up and down it in one go. Other female companions might stagger around when drunk, or perhaps take advantage of the intoxication to rub against me, but she would only sit beside me with flushed cheeks and sparkling eyes. She won't touch me. Very well behaved. The conversations at the drinking table were quite dull, so she often let her mind wander, staring blankly at the wine in front of her. But occasionally, when someone teased her, she would give a gentle smile, revealing a somewhat shy expression, not entirely uninteresting. So at every drinking gathering, she is the first one I think of. Later, she stayed by my side for a long time, with just a barely noticeable frown from me. She could tell exactly what was on my mind. Often, when I grew tired of chatting and my patience was about to run out. Yet I couldn't just leave outright. She would wrap her arms around my neck, understanding perfectly. and playfully act up, insisting we should go. She really suits my taste, so I'm also willing to help her solve some troubles, including debt-collecting gangsters, troublesome customers at nightclubs, and the damp, cramped basement. Later, she told me while drunk, I am her light and salvation. I found it amusing. Salvation should be voluntary and selfless, not like me, a profit-driven merchant. I have always had many female companions around me. Some are for the sake of collaboration, some are arranged by the family to get to know each other, but most don't last more than 3 months. Even I find it strange that I've allowed her to stay by my side for so long. Of course, along with that come many disapproving glances directed at her. After leaving the nightlife scene, she occasionally took on minor web dramas to earn some pocket money. At that time, I had just returned from a business trip to Europe, and she was once again covered in bruises. I heard that the wire harness malfunctioned just as it was her turn. I scoffed lightly. She had been schemed against so many times, both openly and covertly. In just 1 month, she's quite resilient. Even tending to me despite her own injuries, she kept biting her lip to keep from moaning. I lost interest after just a short while, so I lit a cigarette and asked her to accompany me to a banquet tomorrow. She had only ever accompanied me to drinking parties, so those people naturally saw her as a plaything to be summoned at will. It wasn't until she entered that high-spec banquet on my arm as my companion that the hidden intentions of the crowd gradually subsided. After dealing with those who had given her trouble, I casually told her, under my name, "You can be as bold as you like, otherwise it's my reputation that suffers." She hugged me and said okay. Her cheeks flushed as she leaned in to kiss me. I don't mind kissing. Occasionally, when she's sick and feeling unwell, I'm willing to hold her in my arms and kiss her. At first it was just a light, tentative peck, but later I preferred deep kisses, taking away her last breath of oxygen. Watching her almond eyes well up with tears, her face flushed and trembling, yet she could only cling to my neck, whimpering with the softest expression, begging me. I naturally claimed her as part of my territory, making her my possession. So when I first saw her kissing the male lead in that low-budget web series, a subtle displeasure rose in my heart. I refused to admit that it was jealousy. I was just disgusted that something of mine had been tainted by someone else's scent. In my view, possessiveness is an instinct ingrained in the male bone, not an expression of emotion. She probably knew I was unhappy, so she didn't take on any more intimate scenes after that. She has always done this very well. She was very well behaved and obedient from beginning to end. The only time she ever defied me was that one incident, the child she unexpectedly became pregnant with and intended to keep. I never imagined she would be so bold, so I threw her out into the snow to reflect, telling her to come back in only when she had thought things through. I didn't close the villa door tightly that night, but she stubbornly endured the whole night outside. I thought she was trying to defy me, but the next day, with red-rimmed eyes, she unexpectedly gave in. Friends at the time were all trying to persuade me, saying, "It's just a child, is it really worth making such a big fuss?" There's no shortage of shady things in our circle, even a few prominent figures have illegitimate children hidden abroad, but I just thought it was troublesome and unnecessary. Back then, in order to legitimately inherit the family fortune, I fought for years with those illegitimate children under my father. I despised their status, so I would never allow myself to have such a child. Someone teased, "What if you marry Marion? Then it wouldn't be an illegitimate child. She's been with you for 6 years, the first woman to stay with you this long. Ellis, can you honestly say you don't feel anything at all?" I didn't say a word, but inwardly, I found it amusing. It was just that she caught my eye, so I kept her around for a couple more years. But time became the measure by which they judged whether I had feelings for her, so in the 7th year, I decided to part ways with her. My family had already picked a suitable match for an arranged marriage. If nothing unexpected happens, I would marry someone from a similar background who could offer me support. But on the eve of the wedding, the wealthy heiress ran away, to chase after her own love. I found it absurd, yet at the same time, I felt relieved. I never give a woman a second chance to cling to me, but I gave Marion twice. The first time was when she had just had an abortion, lying pale on the hospital bed, yet she managed to force a smile at me. At that moment, I thought she had learned her lesson, and I could reluctantly forgive her, so I allowed her to stay by my side for 1 more year. The second time is now. During the 6 months we were out of touch, I spent 3 months preparing for a wedding, and the other 3 months thinking of her for no reason, but I would never take the initiative to reach out to her. I later unexpectedly saw her in a restaurant. She was on a blind date with a man across from her, smiling with crescent eyes as she shared her dreams for the future. I stole a few more glances without making a move. For several nights in a row, lying in bed, I kept recalling her dazzlingly bright smile, and a lingering frustration weighed heavily on my chest for days. I have never been someone who is extremely harsh on myself. Facing desires head-on was the first lesson I learned when I stepped into the business world, so I had my assistant call her and ask her to come over. She rarely comes to my place. After a satisfyingly intense session of intimacy, I came out of the shower to see her applying her own body lotion. The rich scent of roses filled my otherwise cold and lonely bedroom. I lit a cigarette and leaned lazily against the balcony railing, watching her. Her long hair was smooth, her skin fair, her waist slender, utterly captivating. She still wears the necklace I picked out for her, dressed in a matching bathrobe with me. This is the rose I cultivated with my own hands. A hidden sense of possession grows in my chest. I am finally willing to admit that I am jealous. She can only belong to me. Just as she was about to put the things back into her bag, I put out my cigarette, walked over, held her and kissed her, casually saying, "Leave it there." For the first time, those bottles and jars that belonged to her were actually placed on my dark wood table. For the first time in 7 years, I silently allowed her to step into my life. After that, we tacitly began the next year together. There were no other women by my side anymore. She was the only one left. Even my usually carefree friends couldn't help but joke about when they'd get to toast at my wedding. I sneered coldly and ignored them. I can keep supporting him, but I won't marry her. I said it. I am a businessman who puts profit above all else. If there was ever a moment that made me really think about this question, it was probably one mid-autumn festival. At exactly midnight, I reached out and found the other side of the bed empty. I got up and searched around, only to find her downstairs in the living room, munching on a piece of bread. After I caught her, she seemed a bit embarrassed and asked if I wanted some too. It's hard to describe how I felt at that moment, somewhat amused, yet also helpless, and even the usual cold, indifferent mask I wore seemed to melt a little. I went into the kitchen and cooked her some pasta. The last time I cooked was back when I was studying abroad. Even after such a long time, though my touch felt a bit rusty, the finished product was satisfying. The living room was spacious and quiet, with the hustle and bustle of traffic outside. The faint, hazy glow of the wall lamp gently fell on her hair, highlighting her long, pale neck and concealing the ambiguous kiss marks on her chest. Suddenly, fireworks burst outside. She looked up with a smile and said to me, "Mr. Ellis, happy Mid-Autumn Festival." It was at this very moment, I suddenly had the thought that it wouldn't be so bad to go on like this. But our relationship still came to a halt at the 10th year. A girl who was almost fading from my memory has returned. Everyone says she is my white moonlight. I don't deny it. During the 2 loneliest years of high school, it was indeed her who stayed by my side and gave me the strength to carry on. The night I sent Marion away was the same night Luna's flight landed. At that moment, I was thinking, she had been with me for 10 years. Whatever she wanted, I thought I would agree. But she just gave a faint smile, tears streaming down her face, clearly heartbroken. Yet she told me, "I don't want anything. I only hope Mr. Ellis can truly and genuinely be happy." If I were to hear such foolishness at a drinking party, I would definitely scoff and mock it a little. As a kept lover, to suddenly become desireless at the very moment when you could rake in a fortune, if it's not feigned nobility, then it's just angling for a bigger catch. But at that moment, I clearly felt an unknown emotion welling up in my heart. After Marion left, my side was naturally taken over by Luna. She often brings up high school memories with me. Actually, when I think about it, it seems like we only knew each other for 2 years, but she always had a lot of little, trivial things going on. To be honest, my memory of that time is a bit hazy now. I just remember that I did like her back then. After she left, perhaps I was heartbroken at the time, but now, looking at her, I don't feel anything at all, because I promised to celebrate her birthday when we were young, so I went to the kitchen and made noodles for her. She hovered around me and said in a coquettish tone, "Am I the first person to eat noodles you've made?" I don't understand why women always obsess over things like the first time. Just as I don't know what kind of answer the person asking this question wants to hear, one that tries to cover up the truth. Am I the first person to shave you? Am I the first person to enter your bedroom? Am I the first person to sit in your passenger seat? No, in fact, all these firsts belong to someone else. She had many questions, and they were annoying. It's been over 10 years now, Luna, I reminded her calmly. She blinked her eyes, her eyelids slightly reddened, and said in a light tone, "I know, so it's been that long already. I have already journeyed 1/3 of the way through life, and spent a long 10 years with another woman. How could I only remember those 2 years in high school? When I was young, I promised I would marry her, but now, I'm not so sure. From time to time, I think of Marion. She's all alone abroad, doesn't know how to cook. I wonder if she can get used to it, but I left her a lot of money. It should be enough for her to hire a cook. I don't know why I think of her so often. I blame it on habit. It's a normal withdrawal reaction. I would never take the initiative to go find her, because I won't give a woman a third chance to cling to me. She's been with me for 10 years, that's long enough. 3 months later, I boarded a flight to London for a business collaboration. I had thought I might run into her, but I didn't have any particular desire to see her, until I stood there by the floor-to-ceiling window, my gaze drifting downward. I saw her walking out of the hospital, her belly slightly swollen, flipping through her prenatal checkup report. In that moment, I was so furious I couldn't help but laugh. 10 years, and I still haven't been able to make her fully understand my rules. Children are always the most foolish and greedy means. Perhaps the lesson back then wasn't harsh enough. That's why she thought she could use the same trick again. With a mocking expression, I tossed a card to George's assistant and told him to deliver the message. Reach out to her on your own. Don't give her any of my contact information. If she asks, just say I'm getting married. I wanted to use the excuse of marriage to sever all her hopes. I didn't want to give her any chance to reconnect with me or mistakenly believe there was still an opportunity for us to reconcile. I am someone who never shows mercy when it comes to cutting ties with the past. I stood by the window, watching this year's first snowfall in London, and watching her reaction, but her face remained calm throughout, without a trace of panic or pallor. This was not what I had expected. She should, at least, show a hint of panic. After all, she knows best what I detest the most. This time, no matter how much she clings to the memory of the child she aborted back then, no matter how she pleads with me, I won't soften my heart. The tragic outcome that time was never my intention. But rules are rules, she broke them, so she must bear the consequences, and this time is no different. Assistant George brought back a reply for me. She said that was her and her husband's child. Husband, the word felt like a tiny thorn, piercing my eardrum. I found it laughable. She's really getting better and better at making up lies now. The inexplicable restlessness in my heart turned into something more somber. Later, I met her at the hospital. I couldn't help but mock her with my words. Yet she remained gentle and calm, looking at me with those misty eyes, asking, Ellis, why don't you believe me? Should I trust her? But I don't deny it. When I saw her tears, I gave in. I can wait for the report results to come out, then nail her to the pillar of shame, leaving her with no excuse to refute. I am quite certain that child is mine. That night, the last time we had sex, I didn't use a condom. She was so tired she slept until past 10, and after meeting with Luna, she hurried off to catch her flight. Whether judging by the timing or the circumstances, it's only natural for me to believe this child is mine. So when Luna sent me that paternity report, the suppressed anger within me finally found a more direct outlet. I wanted to see how she could possibly try to talk her way out of this. I used ice water to cool her down. I never go easy on those who refuse to listen, but when she lifted her head, tears mingling with icy water as they fell, and looked at me with that shattered yet stubborn gaze, as she recounted each of those past events one by one, her eyes red-rimmed as she demanded to know why I had treated her this way. My fingertips, pressed against the side of the cup, grew slightly numb, because every word, every sentence of hers left me with no room for rebuttal. All these years by my side, she has been very well behaved, very obedient, giving no cause for complaint. The only time she wasn't obedient was when she secretly got pregnant. Her trembling voice pulled my reason back. A strange, almost guilt-like emotion swept over me in an instant. She asked me, it was something that could have been resolved with just an appraisal report. Why did they force her into such a situation where she couldn't even prove her own innocence? My gaze fell on her drenched hair and pale face, as if fine needles were pricking my heart, making it hard for me to breathe. I rarely give people a second chance, but I always make exceptions for her. I changed my assistant and had him bring me the second paternity test report. He said in a tone of relief and joy, Mr. Ellis, the child is not yours. He was waiting for my response, but only saw my stunned figure. He tentatively placed the report into my hand. Outside the window was London's grey, overcast sky. I stared at those bold letters over and over, my knuckles turning slightly white from gripping the report tightly. It's not mine. This realization was like a cold gust of air. It enveloped me from all sides with an extreme, icy silence. So, she left for 3 months, quickly got married, and became pregnant with someone else's child. An indescribable taste spread through my mouth, bitter, absurd, and tinged with a sharp pain. So, she could really turn away so decisively, walking into a life without me, even nurturing a new life that has nothing to do with me. Then what do these days of anger, suspicion, and those inexplicable irritations and loss of control even mean? A complete, self-infatuated joke. I suddenly remembered that child I once demanded to have aborted. That was my child. A dull, sharp pain suddenly pierced through my heart. My hand holding the cigarette trembled slightly. I always considered myself a very calm person, so I began to sort through my thoughts at that moment. Why didn't I take it then? Because it was troublesome, because of the rules, because I felt she wasn't qualified, or because I was certain I would only have legitimate heirs in the future? I was already thriving in the business world at the age of 20, and I rarely made wrong decisions, but regarding this matter, I actually felt a twinge of regret. All my thoughts were thrown into disarray by the report before me. She is already carrying another man's child. She is so resolute in protecting another man's child. This contrast, this disparity, it leaves me with a lump in my throat, almost suffocating. I finally realized, I seem to have lost her, not 3 months ago when she left me and flew to a foreign land, but at an earlier moment, when I told her to abort the child, under the pretext of apologizing. We met for the last time. I chose that restaurant where the unpleasantness had occurred, deliberately picking a table by the window. Outside the window was London's typical overcast sky, grey and oppressive, making it hard to breathe. She was visibly pregnant, glowing with health, and stopped my hand as I tried to pour her a drink. It's fruit wine, not very strong. I tried to make my tone sound natural, as if explaining, but also as if making a feeble excuse for those 10 years. But she told me she doesn't like drinking. This was an answer I hadn't anticipated. My voice was hoarse. And I wanted to ask her why she hadn't told me sooner, but then I remembered it was by drinking glass after glass like this that she stayed by my side. While she was in the restroom, I slipped the ring I'd bought at auction for a high price into her coat pocket. I thought that was what I owed her. That meal was eaten without tasting a thing. When it ended, I insisted on walking her home. The snow began to fall again, not heavily, but fine and dense, dampening our shoulders. We walked in silence along the road where I had once followed her. This time, I know, this is the end of our 10 years. That question, which had lingered in my heart for so long, the one I thought I would never dare to ask, so cliched yet so fatal, still escaped my lips. Marion, did you ever love me? The moment the words left my mouth, I regretted it. This isn't like me. It's too ugly, too humiliating. Yet I stared at her intently, my heart feeling as if it were suspended in midair. She didn't answer immediately, and the brief silence felt like an eternity. I watched helplessly as she pulled the velvet box from her pocket. Without even looking, she threw it back into the snow in front of me without hesitation, resolute, decisive, without the slightest trace of attachment. The answer is already self-evident. I used to not understand why people would use something as cliché as a red rose to describe someone they love but cannot have, until I stood on the snow-covered street, watching a man buy a red rose. With reddened eyes and white-knuckled fingers, I hurled the ring box away with all my strength. I thought, I suppose I'll never have children in this lifetime. The end. Story 2. After Ivy's miscarriage, her husband said he would give her a child. I wasn't angry, but instead said considerately, "One child isn't enough. My husband will give her one too." When Gary told me he was going to give Ivy a child, my first feeling was absurdity. I stood frozen in place, speechless for a long time. Gary held my hand and patiently explained, "Mikaela, Ivy and I will use IVF. It won't affect our relationship as a couple. Besides, didn't we agree to be dinks? This child belongs only to Ivy." After regaining my composure, I wasn't angry but instead said considerately, "One child isn't enough. I'll give her my husband too." Gary thought I was starting to throw a tantrum and let go of my hand. There was a hint of reproach in the expression. "Mikaela, I'm making it up to you on your behalf. The day before yesterday, it was pouring rain, and I asked you to pick up Ivy after work. What did you do, right?" What did I do? I remember I already told Ivy that I couldn't leave because of an important meeting. I arranged for my assistant to drive her home, but Ivy refused. When I paused the meeting and rushed out, Ivy had already walked away in the rain. Later, I received a call from the hospital. Ivy had a miscarriage. Gary didn't say a word to me after rushing back, but I knew that a deep crack had formed in the relationship between us as husband and wife. Ivy is the wife of our benefactor. Her husband Henry donated his heart to Gary. At that time, Gary was in critical condition, and when I unexpectedly learned that a matching heart was available, I went to great lengths to find the contact information of the donor. Henry was afflicted with illness and on the verge of death. The doctor said he might only have 2 or 3 days left. I knelt down and begged the family to donate the heart to Gary, but Henry's parents refused. After all, not many parents are willing to let their child's body be incomplete after they pass away. At this moment, Ivy appeared. As the patient's immediate family member, she allowed me to speak with Henry. She also supported donating her husband's heart. Henry did not refuse my request, with one exception. He needs me to take good care of his wife and child. Ivy is carrying our child, and I hope you can take care of her and the child's future. I agreed, even though Henry didn't mention his parents. I also took care of them with both financial support and effort. Gary, after recovering, I took him along to visit Henry's parents. I told him that it was Ivy who allowed me to see Henry. Gary promised in front of Henry's parents that he would take good care of Henry's widow. I felt deeply relieved. The husband I love is a man of responsibility. I am also willing to share this kindness with him. But I don't know, from now on, Ivy will occupy our entire lives. Both Gary and I come from business families. Although we met through a matchmaking arrangement, our bond runs deep. After 2 years of dating, we entered the marriage hall. Our respective family businesses naturally merged as well. So we will do our best to provide any compensation that money can offer. When I found out Ivy was still living in a rental apartment, I immediately bought a 200 square meter luxury flat. I planned to transfer the property under Ivy's name, but she refused. It was Henry who saved Gary, not me. You've already been so kind to me, I can't be greedy. Gary and I were both deeply moved. Although she insisted on not taking the house, we still invited her to move in. I suggested hiring 2 nannies to take care of her daily needs, but Ivy also refused. If you truly wish to repay me, please give me a job. I don't want to be a dependent. I want to set an example for my baby. After discussing with Gary, we decided to support her. It's a good thing for women to have their own careers. Just considering that Ivy is pregnant, we specifically arranged for her to work as a clerk in our own company. We also instructed Ivy's supervisor not to assign her too much work. At this point, the story should have been perfect, but when I returned from my business trip, I overheard company employees gossiping. Isn't that person with connections way too arrogant? Nancy is so skilled at her job, yet she didn't get the executive assistant position, but she did. They quickly stopped talking when they saw me coming. I stopped in my tracks and asked them what exactly was going on. Nancy, I know this person. She's the most capable secretary under Gary. Last month, Gary's executive assistant retired honorably, and Nancy's appointment was already a done deal. How could a connection replace her? But no matter how much I asked, the employees didn't dare to say. It was only when I privately found a bold in turn to ask, Ms. Mikalia, it's not that we don't want to tell you. This person is under the protection of you and Mr. Gary, so what's the use of saying anything? Someone once raised an objection to Mr. Gary on the spot and was transferred to the Northwest branch. I just found out that the new special assistant is Ivy, but such a big matter. Gary didn't even tell me. What kind of job is a special assistant? All our work arrangements are coordinated and managed by the special assistant. This is an extremely demanding test of one's workability and experience. It's not a position that can be reached overnight. At least in our company, no one has ever risen to the top in a single step. I temporarily set aside what I was doing and walked to Gary's office. At this moment Ivy is making coffee for Gary. Gary was working with his head down, and when he heard someone enter, he said impatiently, "Don't you know how to knock?" Ivy handed him the coffee, and Gary softened his tone, saying gently, "Thank you for your effort. Don't do such things yourself in the future. What if it burns the stomach?" The way he cherished it felt somewhat piercing to my eyes, as if Ivy were carrying his child, but I had no time for such irrational jealousy. I understand the priorities of the matter. After greeting Ivy, I asked her to step out. "I have something I'd like to discuss with Mr. Gary in private." Gary, hearing me refer to him as Mr. Gary, knew that I meant to discuss business. "Ivy, you go out first." Ivy seemed a bit wronged. She pursed her lips and glanced at me. In the end, she still listened to Gary's words. As she passed by me, she whispered, "Mikalia, would you like me to make you a cup of coffee too?" I noticed that Ivy was feeling down, but I didn't have time to comfort her at the moment, so I just shook my head. After Ivy left, I couldn't wait to speak up. "Nancy and Ivy, what's going on? I've only been on a business trip for half a month. How could such a big change happen?" He could have appointed the special assistant without telling me. But of all people, he appointed Ivy, and I had no idea at all. Gary didn't expect me to bring this up. He put down his pen and pinched the bridge of his nose. "Mikalia, don't get worked up. There are reasons for all this." I am calm, which is why I asked Ivy to step out before asking. "I came here specifically to hear your reasons. I don't believe that Gary, who has always been career-focused, would make such a foolish decision. An executive assistant is like our right-hand person. Without a highly capable executive assistant by your side, work becomes twice the effort for half the result." Gary hesitated for a moment and said, "We assigned Ivy easy work without considering her feelings. Ivy wants to be a strong, independent woman, just like you, Mikalia. You should understand how she feels." I didn't respond and continued asking, "So what?" "So he replaced Nancy, a truly capable and qualified secretary." Gary continued, "I originally reassigned Ivy to another position. But she couldn't adapt. She accidentally messed up a few projects, and there were some murmurs about her among colleagues." "Mikalia, do you understand how sensitive a pregnant woman's emotions can be?" Gary said, shaking his head first. "You certainly can't understand, so I don't blame you for being rude to Ivy just now. But next time, remember Ivy is carrying our benefactor's child." I couldn't help but emphasize, "I'm asking you about work." Gary was also somewhat annoyed. I can't change the staff's opinion of her. I have no choice but to assign her to the secretarial office. This step, however, wasn't much of a problem. There are many types of secretaries. For example, Ivy just made coffee for Gary, which is one of the routine tasks of an assistant. She is fully capable of handling it, but a special assistant's time shouldn't be wasted on trivial matters like making coffee. Ivy said she can't learn anything by following those managers around every day. All she does is serve tea and pour water, and from time to time, she has to worry about the scalding hot water harming the child. Hearing this, I fell silent for a moment. So you transferred her to work by your side. Didn't you consider that she might not be up to the job when joining the company? The necessary procedures must be followed. Ivy's resume has been reviewed by all of us. She became a full-time housewife right after graduating from college, with no work experience. Not to mention working as a special assistant in a large company like ours. If you ask her now what our company's main business is, she probably wouldn't be able to answer. Gary felt an even worse headache coming on after hearing my question. Of course I considered that. Although I made her a temporary special assistant, the actual work is still handled by others. But Mikaela, you don't understand, those people's mouths are just too gossipy. Ivy cried all night after hearing those sarcastic and mocking words. I had no choice but to directly appoint her as my special assistant, and I personally taught her how to handle the work. I couldn't help but repeat it. You taught her personally. Gary, are you free? It's not that I'm being sarcastic. The company just has a lot of business. Even I, the CEO, have to run around between two places. If it weren't for taking care of Ivy, both of us as a couple should have been on business trips all over the place last month. I originally planned to decline some work to take care of Ivy, but Gary disagreed. Henry's heart was donated to me. Ivy should be taken care of by me. Mikaela, I don't want you to sacrifice too much for me. I don't want to give up my job either. My career is my second life. So I felt at ease leaving it to Gary and going on a business trip with peace of mind. After all, how else could Ivy be taken care of? I've already taken on the easiest work available. Gary rubbed his temples frantically as he listened to my barrage of questions. Mikaela, don't treat me like this. I've been too exhausted lately. Just give me some time to catch my breath. I walked over to his desk and glanced at the work he was handling. I couldn't help but let out a cold laugh. Should I call you assistant now? This should have been Nancy's job. Seeing Gary with a headache, my heart softened. After all, he just had a heart transplant not long ago. High-intensity work would only make him physically uncomfortable. Ivy is the widow of our benefactor and is also pregnant with his posthumous child. Gary cherishes it so much, and I can understand that. But I reminded him, work and personal life should not be mixed, especially when our private matters lead to unfair treatment of employees in the company. We owe a debt of gratitude. But Nancy and the others don't owe Ivy anything. I suggest you quickly promote Nancy to special assistant, recall the employee who was transferred to the Northwest, and preferably offer appropriate compensation. Gary refused. No, if we do that, Ivy's situation will become even more difficult. She won't be able to stay in the company at all. On this matter, Gary did not yield an inch. No matter what, he couldn't afford to joke with the company's business. In the end, the conclusion we reached was that Nancy would be promoted to my special assistant. Although I already had a special assistant, Gary voluntarily transferred most of the business under his management to me. In this situation, 2 assistants are just right. As for that employee who went to the Northwest, I gave him a raise. There's no need for him to come back. You don't know how harshly he spoke about Ivy in front of the entire company. I quietly watched my husband defending another woman like this. Even knowing she was the widow of my benefactor, I couldn't help but feel jealous. Why did you call her Ivy? I suddenly asked. Gary didn't expect me to ask that and seemed a bit uncomfortable for a moment. She said that as her superior, I shouldn't call her madam anymore. Assistant Ivy won't do. Gary noticed my jealousy. He patted my head and couldn't help but laugh. It was my fault for not being careful enough. I'll be more mindful in the future. Only then did I gently let it go. If it were any other woman, I wouldn't let Gary off so easily. But because it was Ivy, I forced myself to understand. I've looked it up online. Pregnant women's emotions really are quite volatile. Plus, Ivy had even refused the house before. It shows she isn't a greedy person. She also spoke up for me in front of Henry's parents, agreeing to let me see Henry. My baseline fondness for her is quite high. I hope I haven't misjudged you. The work matter is tentatively settled for now. Although Gary disagreed with bringing back the employee who had issues with Ivy, I still contacted the other party privately. It turned out that Ivy messed up several major cases for their work group. The whole team had to put in a lot of effort to recover from it. As the team leader of the project group, that employee naturally had strong opinions about Ivy's capabilities. Gary, as the boss, not only failed to uphold justice but actually transferred him away directly. That employee is not young anymore, and it's not easy to support a family, so he had to swallow his pride. Ms. Mikalia, I wish I were under your leadership. In his middle age, he actually choked up a bit. I comforted him, saying, Yarek, this matter was mishandled by Mr. Gary. I actually have a new job opportunity for you. Your professional skills are excellent, and staying in the Northwest is truly a waste of your talent. If I open a branch company in the future, and you're willing, I'll hire you again as a department manager. I wasn't making empty promises. Ivy caused quite a bit of trouble. If not handled properly, it could result in losses of nearly 10 million. But Yarek, with his outstanding business skills, led the team to turn losses into profits. Yet Gary actually assigned such a talent to a remote position. Yarek agreed immediately. Ms. Mikalia, thank you. If I were alone, I would go to the Northwest without hesitation. But my parents aren't young anymore, and my wife is raising our child by herself. How could I feel at ease? If you ever need me in the future, I'll come back right away. After hanging up the phone, I immediately sent a message to my childhood friend who also runs a company. Yarek with outstanding abilities and my recommendation, my childhood friend naturally wouldn't refuse. He was just puzzled. Are you and Gary willing to let him go? I was at a loss for words and could only brush it off. I said I don't blame Gary for what happened, but deep down, I still feel disappointed and upset. Gary certainly noticed it too. Taking advantage of our wedding anniversary, he made a reservation at my favorite restaurant, early in the morning. He prepared fresh roses again and placed them by the bedside. At the moment I woke up, Gary placed a kiss on my forehead. Mikalia, happy anniversary. Today, let's set aside all our worries, just the two of us. Okay, all the reservations in my heart vanished in an instant. If I didn't truly love Gary, I wouldn't have run around for his illness, even going so far as to kneel and beg Henry's parents. I deliberately said, not even Ivy. Sure enough. This jealousy is something I just have to indulge, Gary confirmed. Never mind, Mikalia, you are my wife, but I still made a call to the company, asked the assistant to keep an eye on Ivy's movements. Gary rarely get time off, so we spent the day glued together watching 3 movies in a row. It wasn't until evening that we finally stretched lazily and headed out to a restaurant. It felt just like the day we first got married. I suddenly turned to look at Gary and asked, do you remember our wedding vows? Gary stared intently at the steering wheel, speaking word by word. I cannot promise eternity. All I can give you is every single day of my limited life. I vow that only death can part us, only death can part us. But Gary was truly in critical condition, and I wanted to do everything in my power to keep him. Our time together was too short. Gary, I want you to live a long, long life. So, I did everything I could to find a matching heart. Although the ending was somewhat imperfect, I walked into the restaurant hand in hand with Gary. He had reserved the entire place in advance, except for the waitstaff and the piano player. The entire rooftop restaurant had only the two of us. Gary took out the ring he had prepared and handed it to me. Will you marry me again? When he was critically ill, he asked to divorce me. She took off her wedding ring as well. Now, he has bought a new diamond ring. Tears glistened in my eyes as I smiled and extended my hand, but Gary's phone rang. Who would call me at this hour? He instinctively hung up the phone, but then noticed the caller ID showed Ivy. Gary couldn't help but feel a bit nervous. Mikalia, do you think she might have something urgent? I looked at the diamond ring that hadn't been worn yet, and for some reason, I lost interest. Even the sparkling fire on it seemed dull and uninteresting. I don't know, you call her back. Gary grunted in agreement, completely unaware that my hand was still hanging in midair. I silently withdrew my hand, staring blankly at the exquisite dishes. Gary's concerned words felt so discordant amidst the tranquil piano music. This song, First Love, for the first time, I heard loneliness in it. Mikalia, I'm sorry, but I have to go to the hospital. I snapped back to reality and forced a smile. What's wrong? Ivy is having stomach discomfort. There might be a problem with the baby. She went to a public hospital for a checkup, but they didn't find anything wrong. I plan to take her to a private hospital. So that's how it is. So you're going to leave me behind, even though it's our wedding anniversary. Is there any other solution? Gary looked at me apologetically. Wait here for me. I promise I'll come back as soon as I take her to the hospital. Why not let someone else take her? I didn't say anything more. Gary always has his reasons for having to do it himself. Seeing that I remained silent, Gary thought I had agreed. He grabbed his coat and hurried out. After he left, I called my assistant to ask, Ivy suddenly isn't feeling well. The assistant didn't know either, and she answered truthfully. Today she didn't see Mr. Gary, so she came to ask me. I told her today is Mr. Gary and Ms. Mikalia's wedding anniversary. At that time, she was still fine. Later, after work, she had Mr. Gary's assistant Ray take her to the hospital. I always felt something was off. but I couldn't quite put my finger on it. Just one thing to mention, after you go to work tomorrow, ask Ray to find out the situation. After finishing the call, I received my parents' concern. How did you and Gary celebrate your anniversary this year? I instinctively backed out, not wanting to answer. But to keep them from worrying, I still took a photo with no people in it, just the exquisite dishes and the night view outside the window. We're having dinner. Actually, I've already lost my appetite. I opened a bottle of red wine by myself and drank one glass after another, constantly hinting to myself that Gary didn't intentionally leave me behind. But reason tells me that when it comes to matters concerning Ivy, Gary seems to have a sharp drop in intelligence. Ivy has a problem. Although I don't want to admit it, I really misjudged her. Lately, she often uses stomachaches as an excuse to call Gary away in the middle of the night, making Gary take her to the hospital. Gary therefore arranged for his assistant Ray to take care of her. But today, Ray taking her to the hospital wasn't enough. It had to be Gary personally taking her to the private hospital for a follow-up. Perhaps because Gary has Henry S. heart, Ivy sees him as a substitute, or perhaps, I'm a bit drunk. I'm starting to regret it. Was it right to Henry donate his heart? I saved my beloved husband, but after he survived, he was not the man I loved. After finishing the last glass, I ordered another bottle, but then I heard a familiar voice say, "No need for more wine, bring her some sobering soup." I squinted and looked carefully. "Kenneth, what brings you here?" I remember Gary booked the whole place. Why is my childhood friend Kenneth here? The next second, I confirmed this wasn't an illusion. He took my wine glass and said gently, "Let me take you home." "Okay, back to your parents' place." I heard his words and couldn't help but shed tears. "No, I don't want them to see me like this." Kenneth didn't argue with me, instead coaxing me, "First drink the hangover soup, and I'll take you wherever you want to go." I obediently finished drinking it, and only then did some of the drunkenness fade away. I asked again, "How did you end up here?" Kenneth opened a photo on his phone to show me. It was the dinner photo I had sent to my parents. He pointed at the reflection in the window and said, "Because inside, there's only you." I was somewhat surprised. "So you came. What if Gary just went to the restroom and you guessed wrong?" Kenneth spread his hands helplessly. "Then I can only come over to wish you a happy anniversary." I burst out laughing, and as I laughed, tears streamed down my face. "What happy anniversary? It's not happy at all." I blurted out everything that had happened recently. Because I was drunk, my words were a bit jumbled and incoherent, yet Kenneth listened patiently to all of it. "Actually, I already knew." I pinched his face just like when I was a child. "Why did you know all along? Do you care about me that much?" Yet after I got married, he cut off all contact with me, unless it was work-related. There was no further communication. Kenneth said somewhat guiltily, "Ever since you sent Yarek over, I felt something was off. I asked around about you and your wife." I shook my head. "That still doesn't add up. I clearly sent this photo to my parents. How do you have it?" Kenneth skipped the question and reached out his hand to me. "Let's go. I'll take you back to your current home." I didn't want to go back, but I still grabbed Kenneth's hand. "Maybe when I get home, Gary will notice I'm gone." I laughed at myself inwardly for becoming so childish. Kenneth drove steadily, and I drifted off to sleep, half asleep. I heard him say, "In fact, that year when you were going on blind dates, I should have been the first one." I don't know how much time had passed before I woke up. The seat had been reclined, and the car was very warm. Kenneth had also reclined his seat, lying on his side facing me. He closed his eyes and seemed to have fallen asleep as well. I whispered softly, "Kenneth." He rubbed his eyes. "You're awake, and I've been asleep for a long time too." But his voice wasn't hoarse at all. I let out a laugh. "Thank you. Thank you for bringing me back. Thank you for staying with me for so long." Under Kenneth's gaze, I entered the house, looking at the clock on the wall. It was already 3 a.m., but there wasn't a single call on my phone. It's easy to guess that Gary should still be in the hospital at this time, but he didn't even send me a message. My heart ached all night, but now it feels somewhat numb, smelling the alcohol on my clothes. I instinctively began to unbutton them. The first thing I touched was the cold, icy necklace. I looked in the mirror. Inside, I was wearing a familiar diamond necklace. I remember this necklace. In my youth, I held a magazine, unable to put it down as I admired this necklace. Unfortunately, this necklace belonged to European nobility and vanished without a trace after it failed to sell at auction. Even if it had appeared at an auction back then, I couldn't have afforded it. Its value was close to 100 million. In today's context, it should be even more elevated. I felt a bit uneasy and sent a message asking Kenneth why he gave it to me. He said, "You said you wanted a divorce when you were drunk, so can I reserve my spot in advance? You've received the ticket." Kenneth likes me. How is that possible? Then why didn't he pursue me back then, forcing me to go on blind dates? What kind of joke is that? Take it back right now, it's too valuable. It showed that the other side was typing, and after a long while, They replied, "Since you know it's a joke, why take it seriously? Seeing you so upset, I bought a high-quality replica to comfort you. If you don't like it, just throw it away. How could it be a knockoff, and how could I not like it?" That was the dream of my girlhood. In the midst of the distraction, I completely forgot about Gary accompanying Ivy at the hospital. The next day when I woke up, the spot beside me was still cold. I took the initiative to call Gary, but his phone was turned off. I had a bad feeling, so I quickly washed up and drove to the hospital. On the way, I grabbed Gary's assistant and asked which private hospital it was. Fortunately, Gary's assistant told me that he was fine, just his phone was broken. But there was no place to buy a new phone at night, so he forgot to contact me. My foot on the accelerator suddenly eased off at the next traffic light. I turned the car around and headed straight for the office. It wasn't until noon that Gary finally showed up. He rushed to the office to apologize to me. "I'm sorry, Mikaela. Ivy needs to be observed overnight. She didn't want to hire a nurse, afraid of owing us too much, so I had to stay there overnight." I interrupted him and asked just one question. "Why didn't you contact me? Don't tell me it's because your phone is broken. There are public phones in the hospital. Ivy has a phone. Your assistant has a phone. The nurse on duty has a phone." I listed a whole series of examples. Gary's expression grew increasingly guilty. "Sorry, I was busy taking care of little Ivy, and forgot. What if I waited for you all night? I don't want to hear Gary's explanation anymore. I just know something is very wrong with our situation right now." After a moment of silence, I asked, "Have you ever thought we might get divorced?" "I won't divorce you." Gary, his eyes were red, and he was visibly emotional. "It's my fault, Mikaela. Please don't leave me." The love in his eyes couldn't be faked. "I still love him too, but we can't go on like this anymore. Don't you think Ivy relies on you too much? I even suspect she deliberately called you away this time. Tell me, how did your phone get broken?" Gary hesitated. "It's normal for her to rely on me. After all, we're the only ones she can depend on. As for the phone, she definitely didn't do it on purpose." Sure enough, my guess was correct. Gary's phone was broken by Ivy. He continued to explain. "She's just too stubborn, insisted on getting the water herself, accidentally knocked over my phone, and ended up falling to the ground. My phone got cracked, and she also showed some signs of a miscarriage. The doctor said she needs to rest and recover properly." Gary held me in his arms, his embrace still as warm as ever, but the words that came out of my mouth were icy and harsh. "Mikaela, I don't think you should think of Ivy that way." I gently pushed Gary away. "I don't have the habit of sharing my husband with others." From this day on, I started a cold war with Gary. He thought I was throwing a tantrum and maliciously speculating about Ivy. And yet I knew he had no idea how serious the problem was. On the third day of not speaking to each other, Gary gave in. "Mikaela, I'll be going on a business trip out of town. During this time, please take care of Ivy for me. Don't overwork yourself either, just hire a caregiver to look after her." I still ignored him, until the moment he packed his bags and was about to leave. That's when I hugged him. "Come back early." Gary happily hugged me back. "Mikaela, don't worry. I'll keep Ivy at a distance from me." I didn't respond to him anymore, watching Gary walk away. "I also hope we can quickly return to the happy times we once had." Gary had just left when the assistant called and said, "Ivy has been discharged from the hospital and just arrived at the company." "Leaving the hospital this early. Is she physically okay?" the assistant asked Ray, who had taken Ivy to the hospital. "The doctor said it's nothing serious. But the fall she had at the private hospital was a bit severe. Logically, I should rest in the hospital for another week." I drove to the company in a hurry. When I walked to Gary's office, I happened to see Ivy asking Ray, "Mr. Gary, where he had gone." Ray seemed troubled. I walked over and said, "Gary is away on a business trip. Ivy, if you have any difficulties in the future, just give me a call. Gary and I are married, so you don't need to be formal with me." Ivy noticed my expression suddenly turn grim. Without saying a word, she entered Gary's office and closed the door. "Even Ray is angry on my behalf. Mikaela, Mr. Gary's relatives are way too arrogant. Everyone knows Ivy got the job through connections, but they only thought she was Gary's distant relative. Normally, when the boss goes on a business trip, aside from the special assistant, how would we little assistants know? She's overstepping her bounds." Ray stopped mid-sentence, realizing she had spoken out of turn. "Sorry, Mikaela." I patted Ray's shoulder. "You did a great job, and you're very conscientious at work too. Go to the finance department to collect a bonus." Gary asked Ray to take care of Ivy, but he might not have remembered to give her a raise. Ray was very pleasantly surprised. "Thank you, Mikaela." After saying that, Ray immediately turned and went to the finance office. I also returned to my office to continue working. While looking through the materials, I noticed Ray hesitating outside the door. "What is it? Come in." Ray clenched her teeth and finally spoke. Mikaela, I know that you and Mr. Gary are married. I am Mr. Gary's subordinate. I really shouldn't be saying this, but you have been truly too good to Ivy. I closed the door. It's all right. Go ahead and say it. Although Gary and I are husband and wife, we keep things very separate. With my encouragement, Ray continued. I saw Ivy secretly kiss Mr. Gary right in the hospital. I opened my mouth, but couldn't utter a word. Ivy likes Gary. The news hit me like a bolt from the blue, yet it seemed perfectly reasonable. If she didn't like it, why would she do so much? Did you tell Gary? Ray felt even more embarrassed. She lowered her head and apologized. I'm sorry, Ms. Mikaela. I told Mr. Gary. I still have evidence. But Mr. Gary told me not to tell you, Ray said, taking out her phone and starting to play the video. In the video, Ivy gazed longingly at Gary's sleeping face. Kiss after kiss. I was disgusted. Even my throat welled up with a metallic sweetness. Ray, seeing that I looked unwell, quickly said, Ms. Mikaela, please don't be angry. I only got the evidence last night and then told Mr. Gary. At first when I told Mr. Gary, he didn't believe it. I suspect Mr. Gary went on a business trip just to avoid her. So, Ivy kissed Gary many times. So, Gary didn't leave because he realized his mistake. He just didn't know how to face Ivy. My vision grew a little blurry, but I forced myself to say, Ray, can you send me the video? Ray immediately nodded. Of course. Thank you, Ms. Mikaela. The bonus you gave is more than 3 months of my salary. After receiving the video, I sent another bonus to Ray, and reminded her not to tell anyone. I also didn't contact Gary. I want to wait for him to come back and give me an explanation on his own. But Gary still hasn't returned, and Ivy's pregnancy ran into trouble. There had been torrential rain for the past few days. I personally drove Ivy to and from places, and she didn't refuse. But tonight, there happens to be an important delayed meeting. I handed the car keys to my assistant and asked her to give Ivy a ride. I had also informed Ivy in advance, but just as the meeting was halfway through, I received a call from the hospital. Hello, are you the family member of patient Ivy? Please come to the hospital quickly. The patient has had a miscarriage. There were also voices of a few young nurses on the other end of the line. What kind of husband is this? Letting his wife go home alone in such heavy rain, and she's pregnant too. I had to pause the meeting. I rushed to the hospital by taxi. I've already called and asked the assistant. She wanted to give Ivy a ride, but Ivy just refused. While the assistant went to the garage to get the car, she ran off on her own. The assistant saw how heavy the rain was, and I was in a meeting. She was so frightened that she drove around looking for Ivy. When she received my call, my assistant was still trembling with fear. I comforted her with a blank expression. It's fine. You can drive my car home. I'll arrange a bonus for you this month. I had no idea how much time had passed. The lights in the operating room had just dimmed. Seeing the doctor come out, I asked in confusion, is the baby safe? The doctor snapped angrily. Where did this child come from? This is an abortion procedure. What's wrong with you? The patient's family. The husband isn't here, but a colleague is. No wonder the patient had a miscarriage. I could only listen to the doctor's scolding, with no desire to explain. Footsteps sounded from behind. Doctor. Ivy, how is she? It was Gary. It was raining heavily outside. The high-speed rail was temporarily suspended, and the airport was also closed. He probably drove here in a hurry through the rain, but he didn't even glance at me. The doctor, thinking he was Ivy's husband, stopped scolding him and started explaining the precautions, but I didn't want to listen anymore. I still couldn't accept it after all. Seeing Gary's whole heart and soul focused on Ivy, I'd rather he were dead. I didn't stay at the hospital, but rushed back to the company instead. Even after paying extra to get a taxi, I still ended up half-soaked by the rain. This might be the most embarrassing day of my life, but it was also the day the entire company felt the most sympathy for me. Ray has a big mouth. Instead of keeping quiet as I asked, she spread the gossip all over the company. Everyone knows, Ivy and Gary are having an affair, but Gary doesn't know. He hasn't returned to the company or gone home for 2 consecutive days. It seems we've returned to the Cold War period, but I no longer have any interest in continuing this marriage. I've asked my lawyer to prepare the divorce documents. When Gary returns, that will be the time I bring up the divorce with him. Divorce won't be easy, as our 2 companies are already deeply intertwined. Just dividing the property will be a lot of trouble, but I do have a video of Gary and Ivy kissing. It would be more effective in a divorce lawsuit in court, but only slightly. On the 3rd day, Gary finally returned. I was sitting at the dining table waiting for him. Before I could say anything, Gary spoke up. I have something to tell you, I said calmly. I also have something to say to you. Gary sighed. Apologies can wait. Right now, Ivy's child is gone. That's what matters most. I've already spoken with Ivy, and she said she doesn't blame you. It's just that she's too strong-willed. I felt utterly ironic. It seems getting divorced early was the right decision. Are you done talking? Gary coughed and said, I'm going to give Ivy a child. I widened my eyes, looking at him in disbelief. Absurd, truly absurd. Gary held my hand and patiently explained, Mikaela, Ivy and I will use IVF. It won't affect our marital relationship. Besides, didn't we agree to be dinks? This child will belong solely to Ivy. After regaining my composure, I wasn't angry but instead said considerately, one child isn't enough, right? I'll give her my husband too. Gary thought I was starting to throw a tantrum and let go of my hand. There was a hint of reproach in his expression. Mikaela, I'm doing this to make it up to you. I can't wait another second. Gary, let's get a divorce. I took out the divorce papers I had prepared long ago. I've discussed with the lawyer, and the fastest way to divide the property is to settle out of court. Before we got married, the assets of our respective companies were already accounted for. Splitting everything 50-50 isn't possible, especially since I've been the one handling most of the business operations. To put it bluntly, didn't I play a part in saving your life? If you had died, by law, I would have inherited everything. At this point, I felt Gary not a shred of affection left for me. So, for this property division, I'll take 2/3, and you'll get 1/3. After the divorce, you can take care of Ivy however you want. As for the child, forget about test tubes even if you conceive her in bed. I won't be angry. Gary listened, his eyes reddening. To him, I only feel indifference. He tore the agreement to shreds. I don't agree. He gripped my shoulders tightly. Mikaela, I love you, I only love you, but I still have debts to pay. I can't not repay them. Can you wait for me? I won't ask for an apology anymore. Ivy, you can ignore her if you don't want to deal with it. I'll have her leave the company and find another job. Is that okay? I shook off his hand. You said it yourself. Then don't blame me for being impolite. Gary thought I had compromised. To avoid divorcing me, he had been dealing with IVS matters. Ivy completed her resignation procedures quickly. Gary personally went to the HR department. She only came for that one day. For the remaining time, Gary was busy doing IVF with Ivy. Neither of them cared about resting after the miscarriage. We all want to have a child together, even if our starting points are different. And I also hired Kenneth S. recommended financial expert. A month's time, the company has completely become an empty shell. The financial expert confidently told me, the funds transferred through my hands, he won't be able to trace them. I plan to leave the company to Gary. Even if it's just an empty shell, it can still operate on loans. It's just that his finances will be tight within a year. The divorce lawsuit has also been filed in court. Gary and IVS test tube procedure is also evidence for my divorce lawsuit. The lawsuit lasted for 3 months. After the court's ruling, even if Gary disagreed, we had no choice but to separate. At this point, Ivy was 5 months pregnant. Both sets of parents also found out about this matter. But my parents didn't seem upset about my divorce. Instead, they pulled me aside and whispered, "There's someone better waiting for you." Gary's parents felt too ashamed to face me. The elderly couple privately gave me $20 million as compensation. This 3-year-long marriage came to a complete end. Throughout those 3 years, I spent 1 year running around for Gary's illness. Even with the marriage certificate in hand, Gary still didn't understand why they had to divorce. "Mikaela, don't you love me anymore?" I nodded calmly. "No, I don't. I wish you and Ivy happiness." Gary will be with Ivy. I think so, because I believe Ivy has the means. Also, I told Gary one more thing. I'm dink, not because I don't like children, it's because of your poor health. I've asked the doctor before, and there's a high chance your future children will inherit heart disease. Gary, this time you really have to take responsibility for Ivy's entire life. I took the marriage certificate and turned to leave. It seems like there's a sound of Gary clutching his heart in pain from behind, but it has nothing to do with me anymore. I started a new company with the funds. Yarek was the first employee to join the company. Then came the former employees who had worked under me. Nancy also came. She really liked me as a boss. Once there's a first, there's bound to be a second and a third. Gary, most of the employees from the company jumped ship and came to my company. By the time he was discharged from the hospital, his company was already on the verge of collapse. Even if Gary's father came out of retirement, it would be too late to turn things around. It would be better to declare bankruptcy and live off past savings. Gary came to ask for my help, but Nancy declined on my behalf. "Mr. Gary, our MS. Mikaela's schedule is fully booked this month." I did go to visit Henry's parents. After all, even though Gary and I are divorced, I was the one who requested the heart donation. I left some money for the elderly couple to support themselves in their old age. I also told them Ivy had a miscarriage. If I lied to them that the child in Ivy's womb was Henry's, I think that would be even crueler. But unexpectedly, they weren't surprised. They also told me a secret. Henry was critically ill. And I heard Ivy ask the doctor where to go for an abortion. At that time, Ali was already in that condition, and we, as parents, couldn't bear to tell him. Later, you came looking for us. Ivy seems to have found your company online and used the child as a threat to make us agree to let you see Henry. So we didn't dare to go see Ivy, always feeling that the child in her womb wouldn't be kept. Thinking of Ivy's behavior, I finally understand what she wants to do. She just wants to find herself a wealthy and powerful husband. Perhaps she succeeded. When Kenneth and I got engaged, I saw Gary at the hotel entrance. I calculated, his child should be a month old by now. Gary congratulated me in a hoarse voice. I smiled and congratulated him in return. I heard from a friend that Ivy gave birth to a boy. From now on, you must take on the responsibility of being a father. But Gary immediately distanced himself from her. I didn't marry her. That child wasn't something I wanted. Mikalia, Uncle and Aunt Song have told me everything. I was wrong. Ivy is just a madwoman. Kenneth, seeing that I hadn't come in for a long time, ran out to look for me. Seeing Gary standing at the door, he wrapped his arm around me as if declaring his ownership. Mr. Gary, would you like to come in for a celebratory drink? Not today, but I won't be inviting you on the wedding day. We can invite you again after our child's first month celebration. After saying this, Kenneth smiled sweetly. Gary, after listening, he looked at my abdomen again. He mistakenly thought I was pregnant. He clutched his chest and cried out in pain again, then actually collapsed to the ground. Kenneth rolled his eyes but still called an ambulance for him. None of us mentioned accompanying him to the hospital. Today is the wonderful day of my engagement to Kenneth. I couldn't help but ask him why he hadn't pursued me all those years. Kenneth himself had regretted it for many years. I thought we were childhood sweethearts, and getting married was just a natural progression. You also said you'd marry whoever bought you a diamond necklace. I went all the way to study in Europe for 3 years and put in a lot of effort to find this necklace. I found it both amusing and speechless. Why didn't you tell me? My dad came over and put a hand on his shoulder. He said, this kid used to be so reckless, even ran off to Europe. How could I trust what he said? Kenneth gave me a somewhat aggrieved look. It turned out to be my father-in-law who stopped him. But Kenneth, having learned from his mistakes, was indeed much more steady than before. He was well aware of the importance of pleasing his future parents-in-law. He often visited my home. That day, he happened to run into my parents chatting with me. On our wedding night, Kenneth held me in his arms. He said, ever since I married Gary, if you want something, you have to work for it yourself. So, Mikalia, you are the treasure I worked so hard to win. I will never let go for the rest of my life. Half a year into our marriage, I went to the hospital and found out I was pregnant. Kenneth rushed to the hospital and held me, spinning around foolishly. We're having a baby. We were both overjoyed. Just overheard the nurses on duty chatting. What's wrong with that patient on the 10th floor? How could such a well-matched heart still have a rejection reaction? Another person told her to keep her voice down. I heard that because of this heart, he lost his wife, and now he's determined to return it no matter what. I exchanged a glance with Kenneth. We both guessed they might be talking about Gary, but that's no longer our concern. Until my child's first month celebration, my parents still invited Gary's parents to the celebration. They didn't come. It seems Gary passed away half a year ago, leaving behind only a grandson with a congenital heart condition. Ivy and Gary were never married. Gary's parents naturally had no obligation to support her. Enough said. The child is fussy and needs to sleep. I said loudly, Kenneth, come and put your daughter to sleep.